Stephanie Dobson is back with us this week again. Stephanie is a lawyer, mediator, and online educator with Hankett Divorce Law and Mediation offices in Lloydminster and Edmonton. Time now for another episode of Healthy, Thriving Family After Divorce. Stephanie, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks again, as always, Stacey.
Well, we're going to start a theme for the month of June, and the theme for this month is going to be talking about spousal support, which probably could take more than the episodes that we're going to do, but we'll try and encompass it all into one. So, first of all, let's
Very
start
true.
with the basics, Stephanie. And what is spousal support?
So basically, spousal support is money that's payable from one spouse to another when there's a breakdown of a relationship or the breakdown of a marriage. So the Federal Divorce Act, as well as the provincial legislation, contains provisions that set out the objectives and the factors to consider when determining whether spousal support is appropriate. So we have a two-step process in determining whether this amount is payable to a spouse. So the first thing that we look at is something called entitlement. And until and unless the word entitlement is determined that a person is actually entitled to spousal support, then we don't even go to the second question. So first, we look at entitlement. Second, and only if entitlement is found, then we look at how much is payable, how much spousal support is payable, and how long that will be payable for.
Okay, and now I guess if we're going to take that one step further, how does somebody know if they are in fact entitled to spousal support?
Well, the word entitlement is a legal term in this context that helps us to determine eligibility for spousal support. So I like the word eligibility better than entitlement. It causes less fire to come out of people's words, fire to come out of people's ears. So the word entitlement is what we need to figure out here. So how is entitlement determined? So someone needs to figure out whether they fit into one of three headings in order to qualify for spousal support. So let's go through them now. So the first heading is contractual support. So in this case, someone would be entitled to support if there's a contractual obligation. So for example, if there's an interspousal agreement or a prenuptial agreement or a cohabitation agreement between the parties that contractually obligate someone to pay spousal support. Second is what's called compensatory support. So think about this one as looking backward into the relationship. So this is to compensate one spouse for decisions that were made during a relationship that affected someone's income earning potential. So for example, if someone takes time off for children, or if someone geographically relocates with a spouse to help one person advance their career. So the third is called non-compensatory support. So this is what I consider sort of looking forward spousal support. So it's based on needs going forward and ability or to be or to become self-sufficient after the relationship ends. So think about things like budgets, economic interdependence between the spouses, or even changes to one's standard of living as a result of the breakdown of the relationship.
Okay, and if spousal support is going to be payable, how much does a person have to pay? How do you figure that out?
Well, remember reminder to our viewers that this is only in the event that entitlement or eligibility for spousal support is found. Then we go on to look at how much is payable. So this is where there's guidelines out there similar to the child support guidelines, but they're called spousal support guidelines. And these are spousal support advisory guidelines. So this is a formulaic way to figure out how much spousal support is payable. So these came into effect in 2005, or they were brought in 2005, and they've grown in significance in the legal landscape since then. So these are not actually put into law, but they're put into what's called the common law. So there's two different formulas under the spousal support advisory guidelines. One is when there is child support being paid, and one is when there's no child support being paid. So in order to figure out the amount payable, we input both spouses' income levels as well as any child support payable, and then out spits a range. So there's always room for negotiation between the low end of the range and the high end of the range, and it's not exact, and it's not an exact science in the least.
And how long is it payable for, Stephanie?
So the spousal support advisory guidelines also takes into account the duration. So that can help us with figuring out how long that's payable for. So there's some guiding principles to use. So there's two situations where spousal support goes on what's called indefinitely. And indefinitely only means without a specific end. So first, if the spouses have lived together for over 20 years. And second, it's called the rule of 65. It's where the number of years living together plus the recipient's age is over 65. So another guiding principle is when there's no child support payable, then the duration is somewhere between half a year and 1 year for every year that the spouses have lived together. And lastly, if there is child support payable, then there's more flexibility in the duration depending on the circumstances. It could be somewhere between that 0.5 year and 1 year principle, or it could be somewhere more in line with when the children are starting or finishing full-time school.
All right, lots to consider in this, Stephanie. And next week we will continue this subject. So can you give us a little bit of a preview of what will be discussed then?
Yeah, we'll be taking a bit of a deeper dive into more particulars on spousal support. So issues like what happens if someone wants to retire when they're paying spousal support, and how do you figure out income for the purpose of spousal support, things like that.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll chat with you again next week.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey.